Hello, and welcome to the fourth edition of Build on Open Source. I'm Ricardo Suarez. I'm a developer advocate at AWS, and I'm joined by Mateus. Mateus, hello and welcome. Introduce yourself.
Well, actually, I would like to introduce myself as Derek because I love that name. But unfortunately, that is not my name. And also, I'm not going to attempt to sound like Derek because that's probably going to be very offensive to Australian people. But my name is Mateus Guimarães, and I am a developer advocate for UK and Ireland.
Woohoo!
Here.
Well, I'm really glad that you can be here. I appreciate you joining. Derek, he's on holiday this week, so he can't join us, but he sends his love as always. And if for people who maybe didn't see social media, Mateus, you did an amazing video of transforming your face on Derek. I've got to say, I've got to say it was pretty awesome, right? Because you've got the actual lining up of the neck perfect.
Right? I'm so glad you noticed. That's literally what I was gonna say. I said, you know what? That was a little bit more work than it seems because I actually made a point of lining up the shoulders to try to fit it.
It must have been a lot of work
at some point. Like you zoom out, so I was like, oh, why'd you do that? Now I have to keep aligning it.
Yeah, it was really good. It was really good. So it looks like you're in the stage. Where are you today?
Oh yeah, God, I wish I was on stage. No, I'm in a hotel, which turned out to be a disappointment. In Newcastle, it's still in the UK. I was here for a talk last night at the Serverless Northeast. It was a very good night. I talked about microservices and a bit of giving serverless implementation flavors on AWS since it's a serverless community, and it was brilliant. And then we went to karaoke and all, so it was a good night.
Oh. Karaoke and open source go hand in hand. I work a lot with the open source team, and one of the things we do as a team when we're at events is we get a private karaoke room, and we then destroy every song we can find, pretty much. But anyway, so it's good that you can join me. I'm actually from home today. This week I've actually been at DevOps in Morocco, where I was talking about Apache Airflow. Fantastic event. All the DevOps events are fantastic. Next week, in fact, DevOps in Belgium, which looks amazing. They've got an amazing lineup, especially if you're a Java developer. So coming up for you this week, we have coming up shortly, I'm going to go through the open source news, and then we've got a special guest. This week we've got AWS data hero Alvaro Hernandez, who's going to be talking about all things containers and database. So really looking forward to that. That's going to come up in about 20 minutes. But before we do that, we're going to kick off with a roundup of the open source news following this transition. And voila, we haven't got the news at the moment. We've got a link. As always, we have all the stuff, all the show notes, all the links from today, including the newsletters and the stuff that Alvaro will be sharing us later is available in our GitHub repo, which we'll be sharing throughout the show. So I'm going to dive straight in now and share last week's newsletter. So do you get a chance to look at this, Mateus, at all?
No, actually. No.
So this is going to be new. So there's going to be some new stuff here for you then. So actually, for those people who aren't familiar with it, what are your areas? What would you say from an AWS perspective? Your kind of like the things you like to talk about are.
For me,
yeah,
of open source. I'll tell you what. For me, I am a huge Python fan. So for me, any kind of Python open source, new libraries, new things built on Python, like that's kind of the stuff that gets into my news feed usually. But also like I like just off the site software, like an alternative version of popular softwares. Like I just came across, oh God, what was the name? Zulip, I think. I don't know if you know that, which is like a Slack alternative, but open source Slack alternative. And it looks so good. Like people put so much work into these things. So I'm always kind of fascinated, but then I go down rabbit hole where I start installing everything. Next thing I know, I got like 15 Git clones, 14 software installed, and I still feeling like I'm suffering from attention deficit disorder. So so yeah, it's a rabbit hole for me sometimes, open source. But yeah.
Okay, well we'll see if we can find some projects this week that will interest you. Yeah, cool. So so I feature only new projects, right? And again, for people who are watching, feel free to use the comments. We want lots of questions from you. So if you have any questions about stuff I'm talking about, or maybe even your favorite open source project, or even something you're working on you want to share, please use the comments and we'll get that out there. But I'm going to go through some of these new projects that I found, starting with AWS ECR Cleaner. Right. So for those people who are using containers and ECR to manage their containers, and it's actually something that I've noticed with my own demos. Right. I create an ECR repository, and then I have scripts that build new images, and soon I get this like massive list of like container images in my repo. And there are you can do some cleanup with that. This project, if I show you, actually provides you with quite a nice additional capabilities around maintaining and creating a life cycle of cleaning up your images. So I think this is a really nice tool. Could help you keep on top of your kind of container image farm. So check that one out.
What
for serverless people,
life cycle policies, is that it? So
it's kind of similar, I guess. I'm not sure if they call it lifecycle policies, but you can set various thresholds. I haven't actually deployed this yet, so I will come up and say that. But it looks similar to a lifecycle policy, I guess.
That's
but yeah,
cool.
looks super interesting. For serverless people who are using SQL Server, the new project here from Jason Easom, who's a .NET developer and fan. I think he actually spoke at the conference a couple of weeks ago. He shares some sample code on how to use RDS proxy with Lambda to connect to SQL Server, including how you can use IAM, which currently isn't supported in SQL Server. So super cool. If you're using SQL Server need to use SQL Server and haven't done so because you haven't used Lambda because you thought you couldn't, try this out. You may find you can do that now. So that's pretty cool.
I am with SQL Server. Nice.
Yeah, exactly. Yatas. I always like a project with a good name, and Yatas is yet another testing and auditing solution. Right, so I had to think there twice. From Stan Girard, and this is a super easy project. You can see the demo, the Git demo GIF. I love it when people do demo GIFs. It really makes it easy to see what this does. And it's kind of like a very simplified kind of checklist to see if your AWS environment is set up properly. And because it's open source, right, you can fork it, you can tweak it, you can adjust it to your needs. But hopefully you can do that upstream so that everyone can benefit, right? So we talk about the 4 freedoms of open source. And if you do find it useful, then get in contact with Stan and feedback your contributions to the project so that everyone can benefit. So super cool, right? Especially if you're a developer.
What are they checking for? So is it kind of like trying to be an open source implementation of our landing zone, or is it a bit more light touch than that?
Well, so you can see all of that, Matthias. That's the beauty of open source, right? He tells you here everything and what's covered, what's not covered, the checks that are done, and how to configure it. So again, this is down to each individual, and this is based on his experience, right? So he's not saying in the project, he doesn't say that this is absolutely what you should be using. It's just what is based on his experience, right? So if you're new to AWS, it could be useful so you can benefit from his experience. So pretty cool.
Okay.
Yeah. Next one is the AWS Security Survival Kit. Who doesn't like a survival kit? And this one allows you to very quickly set up some alerts to let you know if some suspicious activity are happening. And it kind of provides complementary capabilities to the AWS Guard Duty service, which does this, but there's no built-in alerting apparently. I've not checked that. So, but yeah, so this could be useful if you want to get an alert and automated notification of something dodgy going on with your AWS environment that you want to keep an eye on, right? So, super interesting, that one.
Yeah, I mean, security is always a hot topic. Everybody's looking for as many tools and as much assurance as possible. So that looks cool.
Yeah, and you know what? One of the things I find is that quite often in my newsletter, I feature a lot of projects and they are security related. And typically it's building on AWS services and adding nice little features to make it either easier to deploy, easier to configure, or adding some additional automation to combine a number of these services into something you can use really, really simply, especially as a developer, right? So it's definitely worth checking out and keep an eye on some of those projects. Next one we've got is AWS Community Builder, Ran Eisenberg, and he will actually be appearing in a future edition of this show coming up, I think, after reInvent. And he's open sourced a lot of his CDK and stuff, including some projects like this, where he provides recipes to make it really easy for you to deploy Lambda functions via CDK. So again, I talk about full freedoms of being able to view and build upon other people's work, and I think this one's a really good example of that. I'm not going to go through all the projects, but I just want to give, because I've got so many of them, but I want to kind of shout out a couple of other ones, right? So Minecraft server dashboard. Now, if you're on the chat, okay, I'd love to hear how many people have run their own Minecraft server. I know I have run many Minecraft servers over the years, right? And here's a nice little dashboard that allows you to actually manage, or at least keep on top of your Minecraft servers.
And funny? Last night I told you I was karaoke with a few people after the event, and one of them was a very good friend of mine who lives in Newcastle, and I literally said to him, I said, "Oh yeah, I used to run a Minecraft server. What happened to that?" You know what he said? That was literally last night. He said, "I grew up."
No, Minecraft is for life. sorry. We have to re-educate your friend, because Minecraft is still awesome.
We have to re-educate for sure.
Yeah. And actually, watch out for one of our colleagues, Vinny. Vinny's got a great demo coming up at reInvent, where he takes Minecraft, a ukulele, and a lamp. Right. I'm not going to say any more than that. Right. But just use your imagination, and you can already. I mean, I have my own ukulele, which you can see here, which I'm not going to play because I will. It's probably out of tune, and I haven't practiced for a while. But anything that involves ukulele for me is a win already. So Minecraft and ukuleles, that's a double win.
That sounds like an open source project itself.
Yeah, it is. I think he's going to open source it. So cool. Okay. Right, so kind of moving swiftly on. So I also include in my newsletter lots of demos and sample solutions. These are really people who have put together effectively a bunch of AWS services to solve common problems. I'm not going to go through all of them, but there are some interesting ones, such as if you want to transcribe streaming video, then you can check out this project, and it provides you probably with maybe 78% of what you need, and you can build the rest on top of that. So that was last week's newsletter, right? Let's look at this new. This is still new. This I'm working on this today. It will be published on Monday. So people viewing Twitch, you're getting an early sneak preview, and also at the end of the show, we'll have a survey, and it will link to this draft, which means you can actually access it, and including the projects. So if you want to have access before anyone else for all these projects and the newsletter, then fill out the feedback form at the end, and then you'll get that. So let's look at this week's projects. The first one is Gru Cloud. Now, I think, is Gru the baddie in the Minions film? I can't remember if he's called Gru or not. The guy.
Yeah, he is.
I think it might be, and I'm not sure if it's related. But as soon as I saw Gru Cloud, I just had that picture in my head.
Yeah, no, it is Gru. I think. Yeah, I haven't.
It is Gru. Okay. Yeah, I haven't seen it for a while. When my kids were smaller, they loved those films. But Gru Cloud is a new low-code, no-code infrastructure as code tool, right? So we've already got things like Terraform, Pulumi, CDK, which is my favorite, but I like Terraform as well. So Gru Cloud is a new one. It's going to got some interesting kind of like takes though. It supports other cloud providers, but also supports Kubernetes, and can produce some nice diagrams. As you can see here, you can create a relationship, a node. If you're people familiar with GraphViz, this is very similar to a GraphViz output, or you can do a mind map. So imagine being able to take your infrastructure as code and easily and automatically generate diagrams. I think that's pretty nice.
That is pretty nice.
So
how does that deal with multiplicity and scale? Because eventually this is going to have loads of things here.
Well, there's only one way to find out, Mateus, and that is to try it out. So I actually
Yeah.
was going to try and get time to try and test this out on one of my stacks, just see what
Right.
it looks like. Normally with these tools, I can use an existing CDK stack I've got and try it, but I just didn't have time, and the reliability of the Wi-Fi on the train was not up to scratch. So, but yeah, I think one for to ponder. I think definitely. Next project, our AWS community builder Lars Jacobson, who we feature on the first show, prolific open source creator. He's created a new autocomplete for Visual Code. People who use Visual Studio Code, you can get this plugin or check out the source code. And if you're using step functions, so absolutely awesome. Thank you very much, Lars. I know that's going to be of use to a lot of people.
Is that a new one? Is that a brand new one?
It's new. It's literally this week.
I tried
so
something before like that. Yeah. Okay.
Well, try that out. So yeah, I mean, Lars does a lot of these kind of projects. Lars, they're very big into serverless. So yeah, so definitely check out some of his other projects as well, Mateus, because he's done some pretty cool stuff.
Okay.
So next project is the AWS billing overcharge shutdown. Right. So very interesting. There's a discussion about this on Reddit where I found the project, and effectively it allows you to configure automatic shutdown based on your billing alerts. So it's very much not quite yet a project. It's more like a recipe and instructions and some functions to get you going. So there's a bit of work you need to do with this. But again, open source is about collaboration. It's about people getting together to move things forward. So if this is something that's interesting to you and you build it, maybe you want to create an automated CDK application to make it easier to deploy, or create a blog post about it, then get in touch with the project and let other people know how you can use it. So super interesting. Automatically shut down. At the moment, it's only EC2 instances, but I'm sure that maybe that could be extended to other things. So pretty cool. Next one is kind of GitHub Action. People who use GitHub and GitHub Actions and want to store secrets in Secret Manager, there is now a nice official way of doing this. We can see it's all documented here. It gives you all how to use it, but also importantly, some of the things to watch out for as well, and best practices you should follow. So anyone who's using GitHub and GitHub Actions for their CI/CD, then check that out. So make sure that you don't or you manage your sort of credentials and all your secret information in a kind of better way. Okay.
Cool. And actually, I've been seeing a lot of GitHub Actions. There's GitHub Actions that there's a lot going on there with GitHub Actions. People are getting creative with it.
Yeah, totally. So we now got just coming up the last few projects before we kind of introduce the guest of the week. We've got Meta AWS, people who are using kind of embedded devices, and the Yocto project. This provides a way of automating that installation and integration with AWS. So if you're into that kind of segment, then check that project out. There's a whole bunch of projects that provide really useful utilities as well as demos, including how to do this on the Raspberry Pi, which I have many of here. So very, very cool. This one's going to be interesting. Alvaro, when we talk later, when we bring you in, it'll be interesting to get your take on this. Data on EKS. So it's a tool to build scalable data platforms on EKS, and it's really cool actually. So at the moment it supports a few different projects. So it does Apache Airflow, Ray, Apache Spark, and EMR. But it's interesting because it allows you to very quickly use those to build your own solutions, right? And it provides the infrastructure as code for on CDK and Terraform. So really, really, really nice. If you're doing data on EKS, hopefully, Alvaro will show you some really cool stuff later on. But this, this was some more stuff you can do as well.
Yeah, I was just gonna say this seems pretty like almost a great segue, because it seems around the ballpark where we're going to be talking today.
Yeah, exactly. And it's funny because Alvaro and me, when we first met, he convinced me. He was the one that convinced me that I always thought that containers were for stateless operations, but I'm converted. I think there's nothing you can't do now on containers, and including databases, right? And I think Alvaro's going to show us and tell us more about that.
I think he's buzzing. He's buzzing here behind the scenes, going, yes, I can.
Yes.
One person.
Yeah. So just going to wrap up with a couple of other projects. So people who are using or who using Apache's Cassandra today and self-managed, and maybe you want to move to a managed service. Migration can be daunting, but the SQL replicator is a tool that can help you do that, right? So it's an open source project that helps you migrate from your own self-managed Cassandra to Amazon Keyspaces, which is a managed compatible version of Apache Cassandra. Anyone who uses EC2 images and builds their own images, you may already be using one of the services we have called Image Builder. I've used it in demos in the past. It's quite nice and allows you to build and automate how you create your pipelines for building your AMIs. But this project uses Image Builder, but then actually adds some new capabilities on top of that. Now, I don't want to spoil, right, by clicking on this. If you do anything with EC2s, have I lost everyone? Nope. Okay, you're back.
I'm back. Sorry, hotel internet had a glitch.
No worries. I just heard them. I wasn't sure how long maybe it was because you're quiet. I just thought you might have disappeared. So you're back. I'm not sure how much you missed of that, Matthias. But
no, it was literally a fraction of a second. Yeah, and then I already switched my tethering. It's all good.
Okay, so basically, I'm not going to dwell on this, but basically, if you work with AMIs and you've used Image Builder, check this project out. It's got some nice new capabilities that you need to check out. So I'm not going to do any more other projects. When we go to the end of the show and wrap up, I'm going to talk about some of the events coming up. But I think now we are ready for guest of the week. So I think that means intro. Yay, worked. So normally it's Derek doing this, right? Normally it's Derek. So I'm having to do it for the first time. So Derek, I'm not worthy. It's so hard to manage all this stuff. Okay, we've got some questions coming in. So apologies, I've not been tracking the questions. So let's have a look.
Don't worry. Yeah, people are just gonna be chatting and vibing. However, there is a comment there, but I'll wait for Alvaro to introduce himself, and then we'll see what he thinks about what.
Okay. So Alvaro, great to have you on the show. Introduce yourself to people who are watching.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for having me today. Small apologies to everybody because my voice is slightly broken. It was worse yesterday. So. Anyway, I define myself as a tech person who I like to focus on R&D. I like to come up with new projects, new ideas. Most of them, of course, are stupid, but some of them end up being somehow interesting. I've been almost all my life working with Postgres, so I'm also known as a Postgres person. Started using it more than 20 years ago, and I'm still using it today. But I've also gone through programming stages into some Java. I do definitely a lot of cloud. I got involved with Amazon initially a long time ago. Now I'm an Amazon data hero since 2019. And I'm also an entrepreneur and founder of a company called Ongres, which means on Postgres. You can guess what we do. And I've been involved with open source for a long time. I started even the Debian Spain Association many years ago. I've also created the Spanish Postgres user group and a nonprofit foundation in Spain to promote Postgres. I've contributed open source in many areas myself. And I'm also quite of a kind of frequent speaker with a better voice than today. Also, if you can take on my website, there's links for all my talks, videos, recordings, slides. So feel free to check it out.
And we've got the link scrolling at the bottom for people who are watching. And we'll share the links in the GitHub repo, which again we'll share at the end. So you can catch all the stuff that Alvaro is going to be talking about after the show in the GitHub repo.
Where are you based, Alvaro? I forgot.
In Madrid, in Spain.
Oh, Madrid. Okay, I can see the sun shining.
It's strong, yeah.
Here in Newcastle, it's super cold and cloudy and rainy.
What I can see is the elephant elephant in the room. Is that an elephant? Maybe it's not an elephant.
That is true.
It's an elephant. That is awesome. That is so cool.
It is very cool.
Also because it's not a real one, because that would be creepy. Yeah, but that like that.
This is an elephant we bought in a very special shop in the island of Ibiza, and then one of our colleagues just painted it blue because it was white, and Postgres happens to be blue. So yeah, it's
Okay,
very
cool.
nice information.
That is cool. So Alvaro, talk to us about what you're going to show us this week.
Okay, so as you said, I'm also a convert on running in general what is called data on Kubernetes, right? And by the way, there is a fantastic community called Data on Kubernetes. If you haven't checked it out, also very interesting. And I also became myself a convert, not because Kubernetes was the next thing, and it's you need to jump into this bandwagon and make everything fancy because Kubernetes is the next thing, but because of the strong reasons that I found to run data on Kubernetes. And I wrote a blog post about it and the new stack that covers it in great detail. But basically, there's a couple of reasons. The first one is that there's no problems running data on Kubernetes. There's still some myths that the stateful workloads are not appropriate for Kubernetes, that there's performance degradation. Well, none of this is true today. It might have been in the past with previous incarnations of state of Kubernetes, but it's definitely not the cases of today. But the really positive reason for doing this is that Kubernetes is, all about the API. For me, it's all about the API. It's a kind of a programmable object server, and the level of automation that you can achieve with Kubernetes is, absolutely complete. So this famous terms of operators, which are the software that controls what can run on Kubernetes, can go very far into what they can do with this software that runs on Kubernetes. And what I'll be presenting today, answering more directly your question, is an open source software that we have built for orchestrating and running Postgres on Kubernetes. And one of the goals we are achieving with it is trying to leverage this high degree of automation that you can do in Kubernetes and go as far as automating. Well, the obvious things are obviously there. Yeah, that's table stakes, high availability with automatic failover, automatic backups, integrated monitoring. This is again table stakes. But then we can take it much farther. We can program operations like Postgres. You have minor version upgrades and major version upgrades. This is also done in RDS, for example. But still, is quite interesting because if you want to self-host somehow, these things you need to do manually. In Kubernetes, you can program all of them. But we can have gone even farther that and automate the real day-to operations that Postgres DBAs need to perform. Postgres requires maintenance, and you need to do vacuums from time to time or repacks to remove bloat. And we have automated these operations. You can either write a small Kubernetes manifest or on the web console and click and run these operations instead of typing commands, needing to understand these commands and the flags. So this is something we have even automated benchmarks. You can do a benchmark with 3 clicks, right, and get the results back. So this is the kind of level of automation you can get with Kubernetes.
And actually, I think it's really important because I was definitely one of those people who didn't believe you should run, data on Kubernetes or containers. But it was actually your blog post. Actually, I read your blog post that you shared with me, and it's so people listening. Definitely, we're going to share the blog post in the resources and show notes. But it's a must read, I think, and it will definitely change how you think about running data on Kubernetes for sure.
Thank you.
And Alvaro, can I then see what you think about this? Light Me Up 12 said earlier, containers are just architecture independent, and echo from JVM. What do you think about that statement?
So can you say it again about the JVM part? Didn't get it.
Yep. He Light Me Up 12 just said, sure, containers are just architecture independent, but an echo from JVM. Do you think derivative of JVM?
Actually, this resonates quite well. I have a presentation where I defined Kubernetes as the JVM of the infrastructure. So totally resonates with me. So what the JVM does is offers you a programmable API. Well, all APIs, I guess, are programmable, right? Offers you an API that abstracts away from the operating system. So instead of saying fopen to open a file, just call the appropriate Java call, and then you open a file, whatever OS you have behind the scenes. So you achieve a split roles. The programmer can program against a virtual model where you don't care about how things are done at the operating system level. And then it's going to be the system administrator installing the JVM, tuning it, configuring it, whatever, and deploying on the OS. So Kubernetes is pretty much the same. You program against an API, and then it is up to the, well, let's call it now DevOps, right? Person who's going to deploy Kubernetes, either something managed like EKS, which still you can configure and add plugins and add configuration, or self-managed. And it doesn't really matter where you are, because your programming model, in our case, the operator, doesn't care about where you are. Any Kubernetes, at least compliant Kubernetes, will do the job. And so this abstraction is pretty much the same, except at a different level, obviously.
No,
Cool.
on the money then. Light me up 12. Cool. And by the
Yeah.
way,
So-
S01E has clarified for us that the elephant is Ganesha. I hope I'm saying this right. Ganesha, idol of Hinduism culture. Yes.
So Alvaro, let's show people some code, right? So let's I'm going to put your screen on there, and then we can actually see some of this in action.
Okay, thank you. So well, if you go to the GitHub repository of Build on Open Source, and for this episode, there is a source code for what I'm going to be showing today. And any one of you can go there and just reproduce these steps. They're pretty simple. I just ran one step before starting the show, just because it takes around 16 minutes, and I don't want you to be waiting for 16 minutes. But basically, if you go to this repository and then to the SRC source code and the AWS, here there's a small script. I've made it as simple as possible. Obviously, it would be ideal to do this with the CDK, but just to make it the smallest unit of reproducible. So this is just a script that creates an EKS cluster on Amazon. I'm going to be using Graviton because I love Graviton. And so
awesome.
we're going to use, well, it's small instances. I also don't want you to spend a lot of money on this test. But basically, you can configure just the region. I'm in Europe, so I'm using a Europe region. And this script has been run already. So we've got already a cluster set up and running, cluster info, might be able to see this. And we've got a couple of nodes. So this is obviously EKS and Amazon running with Graviton nodes. And as you can see, it's been created very recently. So
yeah,
30
nice.
minutes ago. And it's empty. There is nothing here other than the basic components that are required on Kubernetes from EKS. You can see here, there's nothing really relevant. I'm going to install everything from scratch. And again, you can do this at home too, home or work, whatever applies. So let me go back to the directory where we're going to be deploying some Kubernetes stuff, right? Because all this is Kubernetes. And first of all, let me deploy a small Prometheus stack. This is an optional component. So first of all, what I'm going to be showing today, to give a small bit, more bit of context, is a solution called StackRes, right? And StackRes, let me just show quickly the website here for anyone that wants to check it out. This a stack of components on top of Postgres, right? Again, it's an open source solution to run Postgres on Kubernetes. So this is what I'm going to be showing. And so let's go back to the command line. And first things first, I'm going to deploy a component which is optional. We don't need to do this, but if we want to show some monitoring, we're going to deploy some Prometheus stack.
So for those people who aren't familiar with Prometheus, can you very quickly share what Prometheus does?
Yeah, so Prometheus is a component for observability that focuses mainly on metrics. Some people call this monitoring. And in particular, I'm going to deploy a stack, which is a very common stack together of three components: Prometheus, Grafana, and Alert Manager. So Prometheus is the component that receives these metrics and is able to store them either locally or remotely on other systems, with also some abstractions here and there, but essentially collects metrics. Then there is Grafana, which is an other open source component, which provides visualization components, basically very nice charts and dashboards over those metrics. And then Alert Manager, which is a component that may react to thresholds crossed over some of those metrics that you configure, and then send you messages on Slack or phones or calls, alert you of this situations,
awesome.
Right?
Good stuff.
Yeah, we can run this on Amazon as managed service. There is managed Prometheus and Grafana on AWS. I'm gonna install this on Kubernetes today just because it's simpler, and I wanted to keep this demo as small as possible, but it works perfectly well, and so you can use these managed services too. And again, this component is optional. If you don't want to do monitoring, you can skip this part, but I think it's simple and makes things more beautiful later on, even though we're not going to have time to generate a lot of data. But anyway, so this is going to create a namespace for monitoring, add the repository for the Prometheus community Helm chart, and then install a specific version. Here right now, StackRest needs to have Grafana 8. So it's better to stick with version 36, which is Grafana 8. Grafana 9 is going to be ready on the next version. So let's run this command. It's pretty straightforward. It should take around a minute. And what it will do is install Prometheus, Grafana, and Alert Manager within the EKS cluster that I just created before, and I showed before that it was empty.
Cool. I'm actually so I started about probably sort of 5-6 months ago, starting to explore Kubernetes. After years of ignoring it and trying to avoid it, I've realized you can't, right? It's here to stay. So I've started learning it. So some of the stuff you're showing is now familiar to me. And so for people who are watching who may not be familiar with Kubernetes, what Alvaro is showing you, some of the command tools that interact with the Kubernetes API. Helm is a package manager for Kubernetes that makes it easier to deploy applications and container images into Kubernetes. But definitely something to worth getting into.
Yeah, thank you very much for that. Most of the tools I'm going to be using today is called kubectl, which is a command line tool for controlling Kubernetes clusters, but also be showing some things graphically.
kubectl or kubectl?
Exactly. That's what I was about to say. That's the first learning curve, learning how to pronounce that thing.
Yeah, it's actually, I tend to use kubectl, but sometimes I use them interchangeably. What are more strict is with the pronunciation of Postgres. So just to be clear on this, yeah, it's very important. There's people, you can say either PostgreSQL, since it's the official long name, or you can say Postgres, which is a short, easy name, the one I prefer because it's easier, basically, right?
Okay.
Less friction. But you cannot say Postgre. Yeah, that's terrible, and people get offended. And you then can definitely not say postre, which has a meaning in Spanish.
That's pudding. That's good.
It might be good, right? But yeah. So it's
I love that you use the word offensive, as if Postgres has a soul and is gonna be hurt.
Oh yeah, if you say Postgre,
can you say postre SQL?
Maybe that's a good name for another derivative.
Yeah, another project. Anyway, carry on.
Yeah, today, people don't know if they say SQL, SQL. You just say whatever you want as long as you get the message across.
Right? Exactly. All right, so this is good. We installed this stack. So probably if we check, I'm using here a namespace. Namespace is just an area to classify stuff that we install in Kubernetes. We've got some pods. Pods is a container unit of deployment in Kubernetes, and you can see here that we got installed Prometheus, Grafana, and Alert Manager here. So we've got everything that we need for monitoring. Now let's look into installing StackRest itself. Let me actually run the script because it will take also 1 or 2 minutes, and I will show it in parallel how it is while it's running. So
that's a good idea.
Doesn't take that much anyway, but just in case, it's subject to network anyway.
And again, for people watching, all this is on the GitHub repo, so you'll be able to follow on with the code as well in your own time.
And I absolutely recommend doing that. So to install StackRest, we also use Helm, this package manager for Kubernetes manifests. I first add the chart that it contains instructions to install StackRest, and then I'll do a Helm install. This command may look daunting, but it is not. First of all, I just specify a namespace, again, an area where I'm going to install the StackRest components. I want to create the namespace in the same call, and then I'm going to install the StackRest operator chart. And these commands are optional just because I want to integrate directly Stagris with this Prometheus and Grafana stack that I just installed. And what we're doing here is providing the basically host and credentials configuration to access Grafana. And we're going to embed some charts that Stagris already has created automatically for you. We'll embed them into Grafana, so we'll be able to pull them later and see already a very nice dashboards with all the monitoring for Stagris.
We like that. We like anything done for us automatically is good.
Yes. And then there's the last parameter, which the Stagris comes with a fully featured web console. I want to show anything you can do on the command line, you can do on the web console. Anything you do on the web console, you can do on the command line. We can use them interchangeably. We'll do that. And I want to expose it through a load balancer. So this will create behind the scenes an Amazon load balancer, and we'll expose the web UI, web console, and this will also be very convenient, right? So this is all that we need. Now explain is hopefully less daunting, and these are the default credentials for Grafana, so that should be it. And probably and with a bit of luck, it's already installed, Stagris. So
wow,
this
that was good
to me. Yeah, it's pretty fast. We can check if things are there. Get the pods on the namespace Stagris, and here we are. So we've got the operator and the REST API, which is the web console. So we are ready. We've got what we done. Started with the empty.
So that was it. Wow, that was quick.
We're finished. But probably you want to see some Postgres clusters, don't you?
We do.
Okay. Let's work on that. It's pretty easy actually. So we started with an empty EKS cluster. Then we installed Prometheus as an optional component just for monitoring later on, and we installed Stagris. So let's move on to create a real cluster. So I'm going to use, actually, I'll do the same. Let me run the script first. It's also pretty fast, but let me show you what we're going to do is I'm going to deploy Kubernetes manifest, and actually several. First of all, I'm going to create a namespace, again, to separate staff called build on open source software. And then I'm going to create some Stagris components. The first one is an instance profile. Instance profile, think of a t-shirt size. It is the resources you want to use for deploying nodes, basically CPU memory. You can also use huge pages and all the information. And I'm going to call it C7G large because this is exactly the size I'm going to be using, right? It doesn't need to be this way, but you can do that. Then I'm going to create this optional just to show how to do it, to customize a Postgres configuration. And I specify the major version and then the parameters for the postgresql.conf, which is the main Postgres configuration file. Now, one thing that we focus in Stagris is to make things cloud native or Kubernetes native. We're not embedding here the actual format of the file. We are using a native YAML representation, which is later on validated behind the scenes. So it looks like a small detail, but in reality, this shows our intent that everything is more Kubernetes focused than Postgres focused, because we want to make this accessible for anyone running Kubernetes. You don't need to be a Postgres expert to run this.
Okay. And Alvaro, would you say that C7 large will be kind of a minimal recommendation to run?
Yeah, probably so.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then this is the main manifest to create a cluster. Can be even simpler than this, but as you can see, it's not very much complicated. And all this API, this CRT is a very high level. So I specify a name, so I want to call it PG. I specify the Postgres version that I want. I'm going to use Postgres 14.4, which is not the latest. You'll see later why. I wanted to have instances, one primary, one replica. I'm going to reference this instance profile, so I'm specifying the size of the nodes. This is for the disk space. This is a customized Postgres configuration, and I want to have monitoring included.
So I was going to ask you about this, Alvaro. So before you leave the screen, right? So in the past, I've always thought, persistence and databases and containers was the issue, right? But you've in there, you've got persistent volume size. Where is it creating that persistent volume? How does that bit work?
It is a very good question. So behind the scenes, it uses a concept called storage class, which is an abstraction over storage that Kubernetes provides. I can specify storage class if you want. By default, it will pick one that's called default, which on Amazon it's gonna default to creating volumes, EBS volumes of type GP2. So basically, the way this works is that there's an API called CSI, Container Storage Interface, that kind of has a plugin architecture. And EKS by default installs a plugin that creates volumes on EBS. But you can configure this. You can create different storage classes and create your volumes whatever you want, including local disk if you want, software-defined storage, or EBS, which is the default. So this will create EBS volumes behind the scenes.
Awesome, great. I just wanted to make sure, because this is something that in my head, until I figured out that how it worked, was one of those puzzles, right? That I couldn't quite understand. Okay, where is Kubernetes putting my stuff, right? So thank you for that clarification.
Exactly, and these volumes are persistent, as the name implies. So even if the node goes down, the data will be there, and we can check this very easily.
Cool.
So if everything went well, and apparently it did, let's just check that everything is created there.
The demo gods have been kind to us today.
Yeah, so we've got 2 clusters here, and they are running. And this is cool, right? So we've created a Postgres cluster. Let's actually connect to Postgres to show that there is indeed some Postgres running here. So let's exec. We can run commands on the containers. Let's run on PG0, which is probably the master right now, on the container called Postgres util, which is one container that we contain Postgres utils to connect, like pSQL. So this should be able to connect to the Postgres running inside of the container, and I can see that it's Postgres 14.4.
Oh, nice. We're in.
As I, requested. Let's create a database here. Let's say build on OSS, and now let's actually connect to the second one to actually check that its replication is working. Yes, the replication is working because this node is probably recovery. This command returns true if it's a replica. So this is a replica. And so we have demonstrated here that we have 2 nodes, and they're replicating. And all I had to do is write this small YAML manifest, right? Actually, just because we are here, and before moving to the next section, this is not planned, but let's just do something. Let's delete the master node, because why not, right?
Ooh.
So
Bold.
Yeah, sorry.
Disaster recovery. That's what we're talking about.
So, Alvaro, so I guess here is good. One of the reasons, obviously, Kubernetes is useful, okay, is because it has this, this mechanism by which it can detect this event, right, and then recover from that. So, is this what you're showing now?
Exactly. So I killed pod 0, which is the master, the primary, and you see that it's already rehealing, and it's about to be ready to go back to life. Nice. And I did nothing, right? So this is automatic failover. What it took, like, it's taking 25 seconds to recover.
Yeah.
And probably PG1 has been already promoted in the meantime as a master, as a new master. So if I repeat this previous command, see that number 1 is now not in recovery, which means is a primary.
Cool.
All right.
And this is all set up automatically because you use the stack rest thing that you set up. Okay.
Yeah, internally it uses a tool called Patroni, which handles Postgres automatic failovers, and it's a very, very good tool.
Nice.
All right, so now let's make it a little bit more graphical. So there's a script called here Access Web Console, which we can obviously run it. But in reality, I'm gonna show behind the scenes how this works. But see that basically here's prompting a URL. But let me show actually how I'm getting this, because it's very simple. So I'm just checking on the StackRest namespace, and I'm looking for the services that the StackRest creates, Kubernetes services. And here you can see that the REST API type load balancer. If you remember when I installed StackRest, I said I want to expose this as a load balancer, and this shows me the URL. So let me just copy this URL and go to a web browser, open it with HTTPS. And this, certificate is a self-sign, so yeah. And then we've got to the StackRest Web Console. Let me make the font a little bit bigger. The username by default is admin, and the password is generated randomly. This one I don't remember the command by heart, but it's pretty easy. So this command will get me the password. I'm just gonna pipe it to clipboard because we are live. Show it. And let me paste it here. It's
So you've just taught me something. I did not know you could do that. I did not know you could pipe to clipboard like that. Whoa, that's so cool.
All right, yeah, good to know.
Just make sure that when you paste, I've done this before because I kind of thought, oh yeah, I'm gonna hide the password because I'm live, and then the I thing on the password was actually not taped. I pasted the password. It showed.
So what I've done, okay, I've got a complicated regex that basically looks for password strings that I use and then changes it to the same color as the background so you can't see it. So, but this seems like a much better solution.
Excellent. Okay, so this is the web console. Everything that we have done so far, you can also do on the web console. You don't need to use Kubernetes manifest, even though they have obviously some advantages. Let me switch to dark mode because, of course, it has a dark mode. I like it much more. And here, we can browse a little bit. We can see the configuration here, which is like the properties that are specified on the Kubernetes manifest. I can also see how to connect to this command that I used before is also here, ready to copy and paste. So
nice.
I can access in several ways. How to get the password. This is if you connect as a local to the container. This is if you connect from a separate container, which is the usual case. Normally, you're going to run some app, and this app will connect. So this simulates this. This is how to get the default password. So get this information here. Let me show you about the monitoring. Because I said it was embedded, right? So these commands that we typed during installation to embed Grafana, they're actually shown here. So we actually embed now Grafana within this graphical interface. So we have here a lot of dashboards already created. Of course, there's no data there. Class is just created. There's no activity. But you can see here we have a lot of panels ready for you to consume. And there was nothing that we had to do. Everything was done for us automatically just by issuing these few commands. And here we have like dozens of panels here about this is being created by our teams of Postgres experts about all the things that you need to look into Postgres database, right? The tuples, bloat, like everything we have here. And again, this was very easy for us to do, right? So now let me just go here and show a small other interesting part, which is, so I went to the cluster. Let me explain this. I'm going to edit the configuration. I want to change the configuration of this cluster. And let me go to extensions. So for you, those of you who are not familiar with Postgres, Postgres has a mechanism called extensions, which is like plugins for the browser. It can enhance the functionality of Postgres, actually in very, very deep ways. And there is one called PostGIS, which is very well known for adding GIS capabilities to Postgres, right? There is on the Stackgres webpage, if you go to extensions, we'll list all the extensions that are available for Stackgres. We support as of today more than 150 extensions. Yes, cool. For comparison, RDS supports around 80. So Stackgres is the platform with the most number of extensions available in the world. And this is because we have developed a mechanism for loading them dynamically into the containers. Think that containers are static, right? They're immutable. And if we want to bundle 200 extensions, do we put them all there? That is a security risk among all the things, right? And among huge containers. So in Stackgres, we load them dynamically. So actually, let me show you a command here. If we go back to SQL, and let's paste the command here, select from PG available extensions, which lists the extensions that are installed into the container. I will see that there's only a few that are required by Stackgres to work internally, right? But if I come here or do edit the manifest, and let's say I want to add the PostGIS extension from this web console, and I click on update the cluster. Now, Stackgres is going to download from Stackgres extension repository this extension dynamically into the containers. And actually here I can see the messages that the Postgres extension PostGIS is being downloaded. This extension, by the way, weighs like 600 megabytes. So it may take a small while, but eventually the extensions, here we are. So we've got already the PostGIS extension here.
Wow, that's so cool.
And now I can just say create extension PostGIS, and then I'll be able to use PostGIS within Postgres. And that's all that I had to do. For example, I can list this command who showed me all the data types and functions created by PostGIS, right? And I can see here geometries, data types, functions. So this is all it takes to load extension again dynamically. So I come here, I'll go to the configuration, edit it, and then go to extensions, and I can add as many extensions as I want, and they will be loaded dynamically. So we don't bloat the containers, and we provide a more secure way to distribute these extensions.
I mean, this is awesome. I mean, unfortunately, we're kind of coming up to the end of the show, Alvaro, and we could probably dive deeper into this. It's amazing. If you're watching, I hope you've enjoyed the demo that Alvaro showed. If you've got any questions, use the chat to ask Alvaro anything about StatGres, about running Postgres on. Hopefully, I got that right on Kubernetes. But we're now going to transition to wrap up to this week's show. So thanks again, Alvaro. That was a really cool demo. I think that's probably I have seen you do a version of that. I think at another event, but this was much better because I got a much. I think because I know Kubernetes more. I felt I understood. The question I have for you is. How much Kubernetes do you really need to know to use StatGres? Is it suitable for beginners, or do you need to be further down the path before you can use this?
I would say you can use it with very basic Kubernetes knowledge. One of the goals, again, that we had is to make it very approachable for the user to run Postgres on Kubernetes. So the most important thing is that you don't need to be a Postgres expert. Postgres is a fantastic database. I love it, don't get me wrong, but it's not batteries included. And you need to have a lot of expertise in running Postgres. RDS simplifies this a lot, right? But there's still things that you need to do, like this day two operations. Yeah. We are trying to hide away all this complexity. So you don't need to be a Postgres expert. And from the Kubernetes perspective, as long as you can, somehow familiar with kubectl, deploy Helm, and create basic manifest, you should be ready to go.
Nice. Although I am jealous of how easy you navigated the whole Kubernetes.
I know. It's so
nothing. I was like, I would have taken a few Stack Overflow lookups.
I have one more question. This is probably the most important question of the day. Now, for people who have watched previous episodes, this is a new feature. We have a new thing, right? It's the Tech Pineapple on Pizza board, right? Okay, and there's two columns. There's one for those people who love pineapple on pizza and those that don't, right? And we can see at the bottom, Mateus and Alvaro, you've got pictures of you. Derek's on holiday, so he'll have to. Which camp are you both on? So, Alvaro, I'm going to take your picture. Are you on the love or are you on the hate? Which one?
It is very, very, very obvious where I need to be placed, which is the one that is labeled WTF.
No, we can't be friends. Oh no! Oh dear! I can't speak to you anymore. Mateus, where do you stand on this debate?
Okay, I'll cut my long speech short. I am like Joey from Friends. I don't know if you watched that show where there's an episode where Rachel makes a truffle and it's got meat, it's got jam, and it goes good, good, good. I'm like that. I'm down for anything. So neither love or hate. I just
you're in the middle.
So yeah, non-committal. I'd say. Yeah.
Oh, well, okay. So thank you for that. So people watching, tell us what you think. Do you like pineapple on your pizza, or is it scandalous, as Alvaro says? So put your thoughts in the chat. Also, if you want to put your open source project logo on this board, send me a sticker, and I will include it on the board. We're going to feature this board every episode. So
wait, what about your face? Where are you on that?
I'm here. Look, I'm here. I'm in the love.
Oh, you pre-placed yourself, have you?
Yes. Right. Yes, I did. And I spoke to the previous people who were on the show. So Gethin and Ian. And they told me what they wanted. So they're on the board, and we're going to be doing this for every episode going forward. So with that, just a reminder to complete the survey to get a link to the newsletter. One thing I didn't have time to go through is events. We've got loads of great open source events, both running local events in meetups, bigger events, online webinars. over the next coming weeks, featuring lots of really cool open source projects. So make sure you check out the events page so you don't miss some really cool sessions. So with that, I just want to thank you again, Alvaro, for coming on the show and showing how to do databases on containers. Really awesome project. For people watching, the resources are going to be shared in the repo. It's scrolling at the bottom. And with that, I'd like to say goodbye. And Matthias, thank you so much for filling in for Derek. It's been awesome. Hopefully you can come and present again.
Yeah, I would love to. Thank you for having me.
Okay, cool. So with that, goodbye everyone, and see you next week. In 2 weeks, actually. In 2 weeks for another special guest. I can't remember who it is now, so apologies. But we'll be back in 2 weeks for more open source goodness.